It's nice being here with the camel and the magi. You at least know there's 3 other wise people here in case I fail the part tonight. In those days, a decree went out that all the world was to be counted. This is a necessary plot point. It's how the story begins, and it's a perfectly fine literary device. Technically, it's a MacGuffin for any of my fellow one-time English majors, but it's not really inspiring. Such an opening sentence doesn't exactly conjure the magic of the story that we're here for tonight, does it? I mean, with all due respect to St. Luke, it's not the timelessness of it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It doesn't leak of suspicion like, call me Ishmael. It doesn't have the right there and stop right there and read no furtherness until you read it again, the confusion of that brilliant, it was a bright, cold day in April and the clock was striking 13. Nor does it ring of that tireless women's wisdom of, it is a truth universally known that a single man in possession of a great fortune must be in want of a wife. Even when taking other stories that you may hear or tell tonight, it's barely in the top 3. 'Twas the night before Christmas. Now that's a good opening line. My favorite, Marley was dead to begin with. Really good. But Luke doesn't care about this opening line. It's not a really good opening line at all. It's a different sort of opening, I suppose. In those days, a decree went out that all the world was to be counted. And with that, Mary and Joseph are off on their journey. We have a reason to go. They set out to be counted, just like everyone else in the world was to be counted. And in this story that gathers us all in the manger tonight, we begin with a counting of one human, an emperor, who seeks to know just how many other people count him as number 1. That's what we're doing here. How many people declare that I am emperor? That's the reason for the counting. Now, this sort of counting from in those days isn't like our modern notions of a census. The U.S. census, for instance, is a tool that is meant to make sure the government is providing services like schools and hospitals and roads and social services equitably to all of its citizens. It's meant to be data for those whom we elect to better serve us. But in those days, serving the people wasn't the point. Rather, what counted to Emperor Augustus was knowing just how many people, and thus just how much of their money each of them would be rendering unto him. This is counting for personal gain, not public service. It's a funny way to begin the story of For God So Loved the World. Now, unlike Ebenezer's story, Scripture doesn't remember any 3 spirits visiting Augustus that night to show him he was counting the wrong things. We never actually know if the good old emperor ever learned the true meaning of Christmas. Doubtful. But the story does go on to count other things too. There were shepherds, plural. And there was an angel. And then suddenly there was a multitude of angels, and well, then there was a single mother and a trusting, love-smitten boyfriend. And then there was a child, singular. Just the one. A child laid in a manger because there was no room in the inn. One child, born this day in the city of David, one more person whose Augustus's people were told to count, except, of course, well, the child, much like his mother, wouldn't be counted. For you see, in those days, women and children never counted. They had no money, you see, and they could own no property. They couldn't hold employment. The child nor his mother, they were of no value to the emperor. Migrants they were, who had walked a long, long way to the foreign city of Bethlehem, where to emperors even though they were told they must travel. They get there and they're told, you don't count. Deplorables. They had to go on the journey. They had to. They couldn't not. But they wouldn't be counted. And they went anyway. Odd how these systems of oppression and power and abuse, that they just passed themselves right down through the generations as if that night so long ago was not so very different than any night so yesterday. Some of you sitting here may be thinking that this sounds a lot like in these days. There's, of course, another way about thinking of this opening sentence. Another way to think about counting. A play on the word itself. For as much as we mean counting to mean 1, 2, 3, 4, we could also say count means to matter. So play along for just a moment and think of what Luke's opening sentence might mean if it went along these lines. In those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world was to matter, that all the world would count. Come a step farther with me and imagine anyone in power, any leader at any point in human history saying such a thing that everyone, child, woman, man, cis, trans, queer, black, brown, documented by some other human, or with no such time for gathering paperwork for their life depended on it. Imagine with me any human ruler saying all of this, all of you, all of these, all of us, all of us. All of us count. Imagine if resources were shared based on that meaning of counting. Imagine how peace might settle in places of war, where hope could dampen out despair, where joy could overturn sadness, and how simply love could win. If only that's what St. Luke's first sentence meant. Imagine a world not where everyone is counted, but where everyone counts. Sadly, this isn't Luke's first sentence. It's another problem with his first sentence. But luckily, that's not the whole story. That all the world needed to be counted is indeed how we humans get ourselves to Bethlehem. But God's already there. God's already far ahead of us. For God didn't need St. Luke to tell her the story. God already knows it. It's a story that begins as another gospel writer once wrote with the words, "For God so loved the world," which is to say that for God, the whole world already counted. For God, each of us counts. But this isn't quite the point either. God is God, we are not. God does all sorts of things that luckily we don't have to worry about. Creating stars and separating waters from dry lands, figuring out how we're all getting into heaven. These are things I don't have to worry about. God does. For God doesn't count the stars in heaven. And it's God who counts the hairs on our heads. It is God who says to each of us by name, "You count. You count. You count." And it is in God in whom many of us, I dare say all of us, may count. One of the things about this story that we hear tonight is that we so often think it's about God. We come to churches to hear this story that we think is about God. We go to sacred places. We tell our family, "Come on, we're going to hear this story once again. We're only going once a year, but you're coming tonight." And in a way, it is a story about God. But if you turn your ear just slightly, like your dog does when it's hungry and doesn't quite know what you're asking it to do, well, then you'll hear a story that begins with God, but that goes, well, so much more. Who here has wrapped a present tonight? Who here has wrapped a present and is excited to give it to someone else tomorrow? Show your hands. Who here? Is that present about you? No. Right? It's about the person you're giving it to. It's about how much you love them. Again, not about you, about them. This is the story that St. Luke begins to tell. We think it's a story about God, but it's God, the great gift giver, who simply gives the gift. It's about us. This is our birth story. This is our narrative. This is the story of our brother, born and laid in a manger, for there was no room in the inn, nor in someone's heart. This is the story that is about us, that says, make it count and make room in every heart. The story tonight isn't just about the greatest gift giver of all time. It's about you. It's about Mary and Joseph. It's about shepherds and a world in need. It's indeed for all of us. And the story tonight is about how each of us matters so much to God that God breaks through. That God breaks through and says, you count. You matter. Each of you, just as you are, just as you were created to be, just as you are still struggling to grow into being your full self, the story we hear tonight is made possible by the great giver of life and of life eternal. But if that's where you put the end, you're missing the wonder. For the story we hear tonight is one that continues to count. One in which each of us count, one that each of us can help make count, and one that all of us can pass along to someone else counting on us. Tonight we hear our story. It's the one about humanity. It's the one about a child of humanity. So make it count. Make your story count. Write what needs to be written. Sing what can only be sung. Say hello to friends you know and everyone you meet. And if the miracle of Christmas counts tonight, if the miracle of Christmas counts tonight, if you can count on the miracle of Christmas enough to be here this night, then you can make it count every night. You can, by adding your voice, by telling your story, by singing your song. You make Christmas count. All of us do. Each of us do. Merry Christmas.